Hi, my name is Paul Schamberger, and this is the story of Tap Talk.
So what is Tap Talk? Tap Talk is an app that's designed to help preschoolers and toddlers learn how to read. And Tap Talk allows parents to have the ultimate control over the content in the app. And it achieves this by allowing parents to create their own game pieces and group them together in ways where the child's learning can be focused on specific objects or specific themes. The Tap Talk came about from apps that my son Alex was learning how to use. And at a very early age, he became proficient with using the iPad. And we had a number of similar apps that we had purchased for him or had downloaded for him. And I started running into a couple problems with these. And the first problem was that some of the contents in the apps were not appropriate. And what I mean by that is that they had objects that weren't familiar to him, that he hadn't seen before, that he had no frame of reference. The other thing is they were often featured in-app purchases, and often the in-app purchase price was for additional content for the sake of additional content. It really didn't add any value to the app. It didn't add anything to the learning experience. So being a developer, I decided, hey, I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So what I decided to do was build this app. And when I consider building a new app, I go over a number of criteria. And I often tell people I have more ideas than I have time. And that's certainly the case. So why did I pick actually doing Tap Talk? The first reason is that I wanted to learn something new. And this is my second app, so I wanted to build on my core data foundation and continue to incorporate that and refine my skills there. But I also want to learn new things, and the original design for Tap Talk included core animation, and that was something I hadn't really incorporated in any of my earlier apps, and so I wanted to go ahead and learn that. The second piece is also audio. I had worked with pictures and using pictures and manipulating pictures in the past, but for Tap Talk I wanted to go ahead and incorporate audio to get the complete app experience of being visually pleasing as well as using audio and adding that interactive feature. So that's why I chose Tap Talk. So now let's go ahead and take a look at Tap Talk.
Sister.
During development, the Tap Talk home screen was a white page with two large buttons running across. When I added the 8-bit theme, the logo, and two black buttons on the bottom, the middle of the screen was empty and boring. To address this, I added an animation using a UI view of a randomly chosen sprite going across the screen, and when it gets close to the middle, to go ahead and play the audio. This added an visually interesting aspect to the home screen, even though there's no functionality added at all.
The model for Tap Talk is based on the core data framework. All the sprites are held in core data, and they are accessed from core data. The initial sprites that I included, approximately 30 that I wanted to deliver with the app, because the app is designed to have parents create their own content, but I didn't want to deliver an empty app, so I did include some default sprites. Those sprites are uploaded into an SQLite database, and on initial load of the program are read into the core data framework. The design of Tap Talk was something I worked on quite a bit, and I had put quite a bit of thought into. When I started writing the code for Tap Talk, I really wasn't sure how I wanted the app to look and feel. And as I got closer to the time I had to publish, I really put a lot of time and thought into thinking about what I wanted to do with Tap Talk. I finally decided on an 8-bit theme for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was easy to create graphics for an 8-bit theme, and if you have less than perfect graphics on an 8-bit theme, it is appropriate in that context. The second reason I decided to do it is there is a market for retro, kitschy, 8-bit theme type products. and for parents who grew up using that and wanted to share that experience with their children. So I developed the 8-bit theme, and I originally had the logo and the 2 black buttons on the screen, but that was very empty and very uninteresting. So I thought about it, and I decided to put the sprite animation going across the screen to add interest and to also give a better introduction for what Tap Talk really is. There's no interactivity with that animation, but that's how I came up with the design for Tap Talk. So, with that, let's go ahead and start looking at the game settings and how the game works under the hood.
The game settings screen is a simple screen that provides a roadmap for parents to use to customize the content of Tap Talk. All the buttons on the left-hand side provide the functionality, while there's a brief description on the right telling what the button does and how to go ahead and add the content.
The game's control screen is a relatively simple screen, but it's important for the navigation and understanding of the use of my app. On the left-hand side, all the buttons will, when pressed, will go ahead and launch a nib view, which will then go ahead and give the game control feature for the parent. It also allows me to add a user manual without having to push other buttons to pull up additional screens. Originally, this was just a simple UI view, and the nib files would just go ahead, would be a sub view that was superimposed over the UI view. However, with the advent of iOS 7, I had to change this into a UI navigation controller, and I'll discuss that a little bit more when I talk about add pieces. So that being said, why don't we go ahead and see how we can add some pieces.
From the Add Pieces screen, adding a new piece to Tap Talk is a very simple process. The first step is to add a name for the piece in the text field at the top. The next step is to add a picture to our piece. By simply selecting the camera, we can use the built-in camera for the iPad, or we can choose a picture from the camera roll. To record the audio, simply hit the microphone button. The recording will last for 2.5 seconds and can be replayed by hitting the headphones. Rover. Rover. Clicking the check mark will save our game piece and will add it to the listing of game pieces on the right-hand side of the screen. Pieces can be edited by selecting the piece from the piece listing on the right-hand side. This will bring up all the details of the piece, and the name, picture, or recording can be changed by simply using the same process to create a new piece. Spot. Spot. Spot.
Add Pieces is the heart of the app, and this is where parents can go ahead and add, delete, and edit any existing game piece, whether they created it or whether it was part of the default. I did run into one problem here with this screen. Tap Talk is an iPad-only app, and it's in the landscape mode. Originally, I wanted the camera view to go ahead and be displayed in a UI popover controller. And this is because I had set the game settings screen to be a UI view, and I didn't have a navigation controller to go ahead and add a new screen. I started writing Tap Talk when iOS 6 was out and before iOS 7 actually came out. And this model worked fine. With iOS 7, I ran into a problem. For camera views in a UI popover controller, they were defaulting to portrait, which did not work with my landscape app. I spent quite a few weeks researching and looking around trying to figure out exactly how I can overcome this problem. I knew that the simple answer was to add the game settings screen to be a UI navigation controller, and then add the camera view as a modally popped up view, the way Apple actually wants it to happen. But I decided I wanted to look for another way. In the end, I determined that doing it Apple's way is fine, and I went ahead and changed the game setting screen to be UI navigation controller to accommodate the camera view being modally added when the camera is accessed. That's it for the Add Pieces screen. Let's go ahead and go to the Group screen.
After selecting Groups from the Settings screen, we can add a new group. Simply type in the new group name and click the check mark to save.
As you can see, the Group screen is relatively simple and straightforward. It allows parents to go ahead and add the groups to categorize the content that they've created. I like groups, and that's partially because of my background. I originally graduated from college having a degree in political science and history. And I had worked for 21 years to graduate from college, and if something happened one day, I actually did. I didn't really have a plan after that. So I bounced around for a few different jobs and a few different career paths, being retail, sales, and I've ended up in accounting. And I worked in accounting for approximately 15 years. And what happened is around the time of Sarbanes-Oxley and Enron, people started getting particular about the accountants they had. And being an accountant without an accounting degree, who had never taken an accounting class, trying to get a controller job was a really difficult thing to do. So I determined I had to go back to school, which caused me to look a little deep and decide exactly what I wanted to do. And although I enjoyed accounting and the problem-solving aspect of it, I wasn't able to be creative, because if you're creative in accounting, you're probably doing something that's illegal. So I decided to go ahead and go back to school and get a degree in computers. And I went ahead and graduated, got my first job, which I still have, and doing tech support, which then evolved over a number of different iterations into an implementation project manager type of position. That's where I am today. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and add pieces to our groups.
Next, we want to add pieces to our groups. From the Settings screen, we select the Pieces and Groups button. The groups will be displayed on the left, while available pieces are on the right. By selecting any group, we can see which pieces are a member of that group. Adding and removing pieces from groups is a very simple process. Simply select the group on the left and then select the piece on the right to change its membership status.
As you can see, adding pieces in groups is a very simple process. During my design process, this screen highlighted a bug that was unable to duplicate or track down for many months. And it seemed like, on occasion, without rhyme or reason, seemingly rhyme or reason, I would come back into the screen and the app would crash. And I got the ubiquitous array index out of bounds. And I couldn't figure out why. And it's very difficult to determine that because I use approximately 7 different arrays and they could be accessed at many different times. And the Groups and Members screen actually accesses almost all of those arrays. So I kept designing the app and kept working on it, knowing this bug was there. Finally, one day I was able to determine and reproduce it at will. And what was happening was that when I went to the gameplay and then came back into the settings, the arrays somehow were getting corrupted. And that was causing the problem, it was causing my program to crash. It actually manifested itself on other screens, but it would be way at the bottom where sprites were disappearing and I didn't notice it immediately. So then I tried to figure out exactly what was going on. And this was quite the arduous task because in the Groups and Members screen, Again, I'm accessing almost every array that I use in order to create that add members to group, show them in the group, show them out of the group. So that was a really difficult process. Again, just like in the camera screen where I had to go ahead and change it to a UI navigation controller, the simplest answer actually worked the best. So what I decided to do is when you leave the gameplay screen, you can go ahead, all the arrays get dumped out and emptied out, because in each one of my others, each time you enter a screen, the arrays that are used are rebuilt. And this is a lesson I had learned from my first lab, Looky Loo. So that was experience applied. Okay, let's go ahead and put some groups in play.
To add groups in game, simply touch them. Touching them changes their status to either in play or not in play.
Adding groups to gameplay is a relatively straightforward process. So, what about gameplay? Let's go ahead and take a look at the game itself.
Cat.
The gameplay for Tap Talk is very simple. The groups that have been added have their sprites displayed at random across the screen. When one of the sprites is touched, a larger view will come up with the picture, the word, and play the audio. The Again button on the bottom will repeat the audio as desired. Spot. Spot.
Cat. Cat.
My original idea for the gameplay was to have the sprites animate across the screen. I followed Apple's tutorial for a CA layer and bouncing it, and I was able to create sprites that bounced across the screen. However, I had problems with the sprites being responding to a touch when they were touched as they were moving. I worked on this for a while, did some research, couldn't find any answers, so I came up with a plan B. And that plan B was to have a UI view move across the screen and respond to a touch. Again, I had the same problem. I could not get the UI view to respond to touches as it was moving across the screen. If I took the animation block out, then I could get the view to respond to a touch, as I was adding a UI responder to the object as I created it. I did more research to try and figure out how to get a UI view to respond to a touch, and I had no luck. I finally put a message in a bottle and threw it in the ocean in the form of a question on Stack Overflow, and I got no response. Well, I did get a response. And about a week after I published Tap Talk, someone responded to my question. And it turns out what the answer is that UI view, iOS only knows two things about an animated UI view: the starting point and the end point. It does not keep track of any points in between. In order to do this, you need to use Select Presentation Layer, something I did not know and I did not realize. So, that being said, maybe the next version of Tap Talk will have animated sprites as well. That's it for Tap Talk. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoy the game. Thank you.